So this panel is on recruiting a diverse team. I wanted to start with each of us introducing ourselves, and I can kind of give you a really quick overview of myself, and then we'll just kind of go across. I'm Veronica Osinski. I'm the founder and managing partner of Trifecta Capital, an early stage investor actually in Plato, focused on seed stage investments. I initially started working under a former managing partner from Sequoia Capital in an office where everyone was twice my age and the opposite gender. Launched Trifecta Capital in 2014 when it really wasn't a widespread or popular opinion to be a diverse investor. So that was one of the theses, and been fortunate to back companies like Plato and actually other diverse teams as well.
Hello, my name is Ying. I don't really have that long kind of resume to talk about myself, but I've been with Google over almost 12 years. So I forgot what I did in my previous life. So that's that.
Hi, I'm Brian Mariner. I'm going to kind of represent my passions and what I believe in as opposed to my company, which I'm not authorized or trying to speak for at all. So I'm Brian. I'm a member of DevColor. I'm really passionate about black engineers getting together and helping each other. I'm really passionate about recruiting a diverse team. I am an engineering manager, and that's what I do. I've done that for about 3 years. I've been an engineer for about 12 and a half years. And I'd just like to share what I know about this topic and try and help other folks solve this problem as well. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I know we're the last people here, so I'm going to try to make it a little bit interesting for you. You can read about my resume on LinkedIn all you want, but I'll share a story to describe what drives me as a person. So in year 2005, 2006, I got into a new hobby, mountain climbing. Any climbers in the audience? Raise your hand. Okay, all right, Bo, we still need to do that Shasta trip. Okay. So I got into climbing with friends. It was a hobby. So we climbed Shasta. We climbed Whitney, which is the tallest peak in California. And about 3 floors in, it was still a hobby. One of my climbing buddies came up. This was March 2009. Came up to me one day, said, hey, I'm signing up for Mount Denali, Mount McKinley, which is in Alaska. It's in 4 months. You want to come? I looked at him as if he was out of his mind, because he was. Denali was the stuff of the crazies at that point for both of us. He was a guy. And I looked at him. I said, no, thank you. Please go forward. And I saw him go on that trip, come back alive. And I thought, oh, maybe I should try next year. And the only thing I wanted is to see how far I could get. So I signed up. Next year, trained like there was no tomorrow. And July 2010, I was standing on top of Mount Denali. The proudest moment, one of the proudest moments of my life. The kicker is my friend came with me second time. He didn't make it the second time either. But you give me insane goals that mean learning new things, learning new skills, and mastering them. I give you happy Madura. And diversity, inclusion, this is a hard battle that's not going to end over a few days or weeks. It's going to take a few years, and that's one of the reasons I'm personally passionate about it. I do believe everybody has talent. We just have to open up the opportunities and give them space for them to all shine. So I'm really passionate about that. So taking it on, even though it's a hard one.
So the first moderator shared some great statistics about how diversity is important and makes companies stronger and better. I kind of wanted to actually dig into this because I think there's still a lot of kind of PR or studies on it, but I wanted to get into some anecdotes on how companies that you guys have worked at have leveraged diversity as a competitive advantage. And maybe, Brian, you can kind of share an anecdote of how that's helped.
Sure. I can't, of course, be too specific, but I've definitely been in some discussions where we were talking about what should we pursue, what's a great feature to go after. And because of the fact that I was in the room, I was able to shed some light on why a particular feature needed to be pursued, why it was important. and kind of get everybody in the room to see my side of things. And I think just being there, having that perspective, having people not thinking about that perspective, but because I'm, invited to these meetings at, the director level staff and I can speak, that's part of it. I also think, another anecdote I'll say is that I've been to this event my wife invited me to where it was called a blind cafe, and we went there and the hosts were blind. You'd go into this room like this, but it would be pitch black. Effectively, the hosts as blind people were the only ones who could see. And they would lead you to their table. You'd sit and have a whole dinner. You couldn't see anything, right? And I kind of understood what it meant to be blind for an evening. And one of the most uplifting things they said was that there's a certain company's products who, if you go on LinkedIn and you associate it to me, maybe you'll realize what I'm talking about, had made their lives a whole lot better, a whole lot easier. And I know that's only possible because we employ people who use those products as well as develop them. And that's been a huge competitive advantage. No one meets our capabilities in that respect. And so that's another anecdote I would say I think applies, and something that, folks at the company are happy to talk about because it's a big win. So.
Ying, I know that Google has some stories here, but maybe you can share your personal one.
So this is actually a story I heard from some other product inside Google. Is there's a team trying to develop a camera, right? So it's a new type of camera. We wanted to make it so different from the conventional one where we hold at hand, take pictures, right? So the way that the designers came up with is it's a small camera. You hang it with a necklace, right, on your chest, and they design and produce a batch and try it out. And later it took a women engineer come up and say, you know what, it's not women friendly. Because the angle, right, once you hand it here, the angle, the picture they're taking is different from what you designed it for. Right, so, later we had women designers come in to help, and we changed the design from a necklace type of thing, becoming a clipper, right? So you can clip anywhere on your purse, So I thought that's quite interesting, kind of sharing how come from a gender point of view and change the design and make it popular around our audience.
Madura, do you have a story that you'd want to share?
I'll tell one. So I lead the data science machine learning team at Workday, and one of the things that we're struggling with is data sets. If the data sets you use to train your algorithms do not include diversity, you create a shitty product. So I've seen it firsthand where, for example, for voice recognition systems, where if you have an accent, they don't recognize you as well as a white male Western accent. So that's something that we see it firsthand. And the other one that is one of the products we do is recruiting. And as an offering, because Workday is used by all the companies, one of the offerings that we're talking about product creation is how do we give them tools in the product using machine learning to try to identify, let's say, job descriptions. If you're using certain terms that are not friendly for certain types of underrepresented minorities to apply, the software will give you hints as to, hey, you might want to use this instead of that. So job descriptions and even for bias, blind submitting resume. So a lot of the thinking when there is women in the room, for example, one of the things that we came up with, the girls in the discussions, is like, hey, can we suggest that the must-have list in your job descriptions, minimize that to the most minimal stuff you need? Because we all know that if a woman meets 90% of the criteria, only then she will feel comfortable applying, versus men are more comfortable applying, even if 40% or whatever that stat is there. So some of the stuff will never come up when you're building products unless you have a diverse set of group looking at it.
Yeah, I actually heard about very similar stats It's women, you feel like you have to fulfill all the requirements before, So something that we did inside Google is one of our SVPs came up and said, let me do something different. For this promo cycle, I'm going to send an email, encourage everybody, right? You feel you are eligible, or you are qualified, you should self-nominate. And when he sends out this email, right, we find out the self-nomination ratio between women and men is about the same. And once he stopped sending, women's dropped. So we keep on doing this every cycle.
So this is actually a good segue to kind of the meat of our panel, which is recruiting for diverse teams. And I heard about the Stanford Research study on over 75 recruiting sessions held by over 60 companies, and they identified countless ways the recruiters might be alienating female or minority recruits. Madhuri, you touched upon a couple of them. These are things like masculine language in the job description or sexist jokes during the interview process. How do you guys think about all these touch points in navigating the recruiting process and make sure that you hire for diverse teams?
I can go. So Workday has been in hypergrowth for 6 years that I've been there at, and one of the things that we are all struggling with, not just Workday, is finding during hiring, how do you maximize your chances of finding somebody and them making it right from the beginning of you finding that lead all the way to closing them, and also making sure you do everything necessary to grow them, retain them, so that they remain. So it's not just about that, oh, did I meet my numbers for whatever percentages you're going for, but also looking at the entire pipeline. I'll tell you an example. So because we are in hypergrowth stage, I'm telling all the leaders, hire, hire, hire. Why aren't your numbers moving? And then I was looking at one of the teams. We look at the recruiting metrics every single month, what's going on at different points of the pipeline, and that person has ended up hiring a homogeneous team. And I looked at my recruiting partner saying, hey, I thought we agreed on at least equal representation in the sourcing pool, because that's the metric I was tracking for my sourcing. And he said, yeah, I'm bringing 50% women. We were focusing on that, let's say, for example. And he's looking at me going, you should look into whether there's biases playing a role. So that was one of the points where, as a leadership team, we started looking at, okay, what can we do to make sure the processes we're using to interview, are they playing a role? Is the mix of interviewees right? Are you making sure it's not intimidating? Because most girls know this, but girls don't do well in the whiteboard, and it's just not a good experience for girls. So we're even talking about experimenting. Okay, why don't we switch to a different method and try to see if that's going to work? But at the end of the day, whatever your metrics are, just track them and keep piloting different things to try to see if you see a difference, because nobody wants to raise the bar. It's not about that. It's more about, is this something anywhere in our entire process that we're not doing right that's stopping the pipe? The other thing is, I'm going to ask him to send me all the resumes that they're rejecting before they even get to the hiring manager, because we are better at, like Dom was saying earlier, detecting if there is potential based on whatever they have done that the candidate might not even realize, and recruiters are not as nuanced at their scanning as managers are. So for us, it's just been, okay, what's going on? Keep an eye on metric, and then keep digging and trying different things. And the other big one is sources, going to the non-traditional sources. That's known for everyone, but what we're seeing is if you just try and swoop in and say, oh, this time let's go to this university, set up a tent, and then we'll find our whatever 50% people, right? It doesn't work that way. What we're seeing work is we build relationships with these, let's say, universities that are non-traditional, And you start seeing a difference after months and sometimes years of being good partners with them, doing teaching sessions in the university about industry lectures or webinars, whatever you want to say, and engaging with they have the groups like ERGs, universities have women's group and all that, but helping them during their academia itself. So there is some kind of bond for them to then think of your company as a good place to go to because there is some resonance for them. Oh, if they were like this for us and helping us now, I feel safe going to that company even for interviewing because there is so much demand. Relationships, partnerships that are longer term, that's working out better than just going point, click, and trying to hire.
That's a very long answer. I think you cover many.
Trying everything we can. I tell you, I keep shifting. Like, oh, this is not working. Let's try that.
Yeah, very interesting. I think I heard about the whiteboarding thing, but honestly, I never see any data backing it up. And from my experiences, whiteboarding is one great way just to test out the engineers. There are other ways. Actually, nowadays I prefer more having candidates working on a laptop.
Yes,
that's
yeah,
supposed to
definitely.
be, in real life, when you solve a problem, you don't really solve on a whiteboard. So the other thing is really how to kind of reduce the stress of, hey, having somebody just looking over your shoulder, look at how you do programming, right? Just mimic your average kind of daily life when you, as an engineer, how you work, and kind of foster that kind of environment in the interview session. So that's that. Maybe another one to echo on is the sourcing one. So I think we touched point earlier. For a company like Google, right, we were really looking at a lot earlier stage of sourcing, right? So we're looking at, hey, in K9 to 12, right, is there enough participants of the diverse group in engineering, computer science, right? If not, is it because that they don't have access to those computers even earlier in life? So trying to look into the sourcing pool and how to grow that pool. The ultimate rule, right, in terms of hiring is you don't lower bar for certain category of people. You don't do that, but you want to make sure the source of pool is well represented by all these teams.
It's interesting, you kind of touched upon the kind of first step, which is the talent pool and going really deep into kind of who's getting computer science degrees, who's participating in STEM. I heard that Berkeley changed their intro to programming class to be the beauty and joy of computing, and for the first time ever, they saw more women enroll than men in the entire history of Berkeley's. So how do you guys think about the talent pool, like the very first step in reaching deeper? And you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but maybe some of the other panelists can share how they think about that, digging much deeper into kind of expanding the talent pool.
I'll chime in. I think two things that we're doing is, one, making sure that at the sourcing stage we have an equitable, reasonable representation of all the groups that might be in the pool, as opposed to having it heavily weighted toward one group. At sourcing, you're not making decisions about candidates. You're literally just finding folks who have either applied or matched the criteria that you're looking for. And I don't think that you should have a problem sourcing the same percentage of candidates of a particular group that are in the United States population. It's difficult, but it shouldn't really be like an unsolvable problem. And so when we started to attack that problem, we saw more candidates at the further stages of the interview rounds, especially on sites. We had more on-site interviews with black candidates with my group since I've become a manager than I'd ever seen before. It was an easy stat to move, frankly, and we moved it. And same goes for women candidates, and I'm hoping to increase the number of women in our group very quickly as a result of that. The other one is in colleges, there's a pretty diverse group of people right now studying computer science and engineering. And so having a robust internship program is a great tool to increase your pool of candidates. And then hiring those folks when they do well in the internships is kind of essential. And then, of course, promoting those people when they do well after they've come to your company is the other key thing. Otherwise, you're going to see the bottom fall out in 2 to 3 years after they've come in. And so those are the basic things that you can do to get a more diverse pool starting from the beginning and moving up the pipe as far as we're concerned. And those work really well for us.
So women and minorities remain underrepresented at the higher echelons within companies. You happen to be at higher levels within your company. How do you think about this challenge of really promoting and having more representation at the higher levels?
Actually, I'm very curious, do we have data to back it up? I was trying to...
This was, I don't have the source here, but it was from Financial Times. They did a recent excerpt of women especially.
I've seen one stat, which is 14% of women leave mid-career, mid-level. Who knows what the reasons are, but everybody makes their own guesses, right?
Yeah, at every diversity reporting website I've seen for major companies, there are many, many fewer women in leadership. If you look at their stats, it's sad but true.
You do have to support these groups more, the underrepresented groups. And what Dom was saying, or the imposter syndrome, is more intense for all the people where you don't see enough people like you around you. So that's a fact. At least the 2-3 things we are doing to try to get past that is training managers on watching for bias. Like Nidhi was saying earlier, during calibration sessions, if you have at least some underrepresented people in the sessions, they try to train others to look out for, in my group, for example, we were talking about 2 senior engineers, 1 woman, 1 guy, during last calibration, and everybody was saying, oh, he's ready to be groomed for the next staff position. And I had to ask them explicitly, why aren't we talking about her? And in her case, she's also shy. And I had to ask that question, like I think Nidhi was saying earlier, that is it because she doesn't say much? Are we seeing, in terms of contribution, a difference? And then there was a much richer conversation around, oh, not really, we didn't really think of her. So some of it is going to be at all levels. Leaders will have to be aware of biases and foster conversations that are just there's nothing malicious, it's just our biases playing a role. And mentorship programs, sponsorship programs. One more thing all the URG groups are doing is creating almost custom workshops to how do you do career pathing? How do you even think about that? Because one of the phenomenons that even I have seen, just my last promotion, is they said, you're ready to take this, and I was saying, no, I need more time to build up skills for it. And it's real for all the underrepresented communities. So we're doing workshops to walk through, how do you think about your career? How do you even have career conversations where you don't come off as somebody who's tooting their own horn, but you do ask for what you want. But all that eventually, hopefully, will stop people from dropping because they just don't say anything. And then they give up and go away. That's my hypothesis, as you were saying, based on whichever people I've talked to.
Yeah. So the reason I'm asking for data is, if there's a data to back it up, there must be research and people kind of digging behind the data. What does that mean, right? Usually I have this kind of 3 rules for kind of diversity or just in general women engineering is, number 1, I think as society, right, we should have equal opportunity for everybody, right? Women wants to become an engineer, there's opportunity. Number 2 is for us, right? We need to realize there is opportunity. I can become, a programmer. I can go up my career ladder. There's always opportunity in there. The third thing is really, I need to feel comfortable with my choice. So the choice could be, after several years, I decided to do something else. I find my passion in other careers. That's totally fine. But as long as you feel comfortable and confident, I think, that's the ultimate kind of, the choice that you're making. Now, back into, the various ways, right, into doing this. So I did observe there's a drop of, the absolute number of women senior leaders. And it caused a problem in the sense of having the kind of a more junior leaders to have visibility and access to the bigger, right, the higher network. One of the things that I've seen in the teams in various companies doing is create a championship program. It's basically say, at VP, senior VP level, right, you kind of spot there's high potential growth in this group of people. You want to be a champion because they're underrepresented in the senior level, right? So you champion this people say, hey, there's a new program coming up, or there's a significant high visible project. Let's nominate somebody in the middle layer, right? Go and work on this, so that they get opportunity to go in there. And this is probably if you have very few high women leaders, right, in the high positions, you are kind of in the disadvantage point of getting access to those resources, and this is critical.
Thank you. It looks like we're up on time right now, but we can move to questions, and so I think that they're gonna put away for. Okay. What do you think about the YouTube recruiter that sued the company for discriminating against white Asian men? Is it illegal to only source for underrepresented people?
I think we talk about this, right? So it's not okay, if you lower the bar, or it's not okay, you just limit your resources to certain pools, right? Honestly, I haven't heard about.
I had a conversation about this with a recruiting team. What's legal, what's not, because there is a specific way to do it, which falls within the legal boundaries, and the way we are looking at it, at least, is for us to build the right products, we need to hire a diverse skill set. So it's a business need that we're trying to satisfy, and I don't think there's any law that doesn't let you have goals around sourcing, distribution, or nobody's telling you can't do that. At the end of the day, it is a business metric, because we will not build products that will serve everybody. So at least I haven't seen a problem making goals around it within our team or within our company. But we did look at, I do remember, we asked them, hey, can you check with the lawyers just to make sure we're not doing something that's not allowed?
I think here the keyword is only source from, right? So that's problematic.
I do know it's within the boundaries, because our recruiting team specifically said this is the only thing we can do within the legal boundaries, but nobody's stopping you from having business goals for your own business units. So we went with that.
What are some interview practices that foster an inclusive candidate experience to allow candidates to showcase their best attributes while interviewing?
I think we also talked a little bit, during our earlier conversation, right? One is having your interviews more mimic your average, daily working practice, right? What are other things I think of?
The one thing we were talking about earlier is one of the things not to do is when you're trying to ask someone to come in for an interview, don't start with, I'm trying to get my diversity numbers better. Do you want to talk to us? Please do not do that. You're insulting that person. So I can say what not to do, which is mention the skill sets they have and why they match with the position that you're trying to hire. And you can have your signature as I care about diversity and inclusion, but don't start with that, because you're insulting that person by saying that, hey, I care about diversity, do you want to talk to us?
Ryan?
I would say, lead with recruiting and then follow with the interview questions. I think that's a good way to have an inclusive candidate experience, is like make it clear that based upon what you've read on their resume, you think they could be valuable to the team, you lead with that, I think any candidate's going to be more interested and feel more welcome than if you lead with, hey, can you solve this problem? And so, just as a simple tactical matter, that's one of the things I do. And then if down the line, at the end of the interview, it doesn't work out, at least I've, put my best foot forward there. So,
Is there anything that people should avoid saying in an interview?
They should not say, oh, there's a lot that you shouldn't ask how old they are, you shouldn't ask where they're from, right? All these kind of things. By the way, I do believe most of the company will provide interview trainings. If not, you should really advise your company to get a HR BP helping you to set a program for that.
or Google it. There's plenty of legal requirements.
Google for those interview questions.
Legal requirements on what not to do are very important. Please don't do those things.
So this is a really good question. As a relatively privileged white male, what can I do to eliminate my own unconscious biases?
I'll jump in there. I think you can't. That's the short answer. The long answer is recognize your biases, interrogate them, learn about them, employ some introspection, and then challenge them if you think that they are not warranted. If you think for some reason they are warranted, talk to people about why they are, and get some closure on the issue by talking to some people you respect and ask them about them. But if you don't interrogate them, you're not going to make any progress, and you definitely can't eliminate them, right? But you have to at least ask yourself, what am I biased towards or against? And you have to know that in your own head. You don't have to admit it or talk about it to anyone else that you don't trust, but at least knowing it, I think, is really the main thing that would help you move ahead and challenge those things and get to a point where you find a candidate that might have been against those, but it turns out they're really great, and you would have never thought if you hadn't interrogated those biases yourself. And I have to do the same thing, of course, myself, and I do that.
Yeah, I should have a kind of an interesting research kind of story to tell about this unconscious bias. So first of all, it's bias, right? So it's something you formed in you that help you to make kind of an effective decision fast. But the fact that it's unconscious, so you don't realize it that well. So there was a research study that they had before is they put people right into kind of an experiment, just get them associate concepts, right? So they're intentionally doing, white associate with good, black associate with bad, and it's just general concepts. So at the end of the study, they show people into a waiting room. And in the waiting room, there's 2 open seats, right? So they're instructed to take one. Now, one open seat is next to an African American, and another one is associated with a Caucasian American. And that's actually the kind of experiment is about, is how do they predict which seat you can take, right? And the prediction has nothing to do with how well you did in the earlier exercise. It has everything to do with how fast you pick a seat. So if you pick seat, you take 1 second to think and then pick a seat, you're more likely to pick, next to the African American. So what that means is there is unconscious bias in ourselves, but it takes conscious effort to overcome them. So I think that's kind of related to this, is we need to interrogate our unconscious bias.
Madhura, you mentioned managers are better than recruiters at matching a candidate to the right role. What can we do to get recruiters to the same level?
The only way I've seen it work is when I, let's say, look through resumes with them. I talk out aloud when I'm looking at it and saying, oh, no, maybe not, and here is blah, 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 why? And it's only over time they'll start getting more than just looking at keywords as you're talking through your reasoning with them. But it takes work, and my recruiting partner hasn't changed in few months, so now we are at a stage where I feel comfortable enough where I can say, okay, we're looking for this, let's spend a couple of hours talking through some resumes so you get a sense of what to look for. And then over time, just sample checking at certain intervals, just to make sure the calibration is still right.
You all are at bigger companies. How do small companies attract underrepresented engineers that get hammered with recruiter emails all day?
I would say it's not that hard for small companies to steal from us. If the one thing that I've seen that works, especially with the newer generation, if you have a good mission, if you have a mission that at least some people in the world care about, hopefully some of them are these people that you're getting out of the large companies. But that's the biggest advantage smaller companies have, that passion and the mission and that thirst to change the world. That'll get you a lot of my engineers have left because of that. I want the best for them. If something they're passionate about is not what we are doing, I want them to go to that place. But that's the one thing I've seen where actually small companies have an advantage over large.
How do you support diversity when you're recruiting internationally, specifically non-diverse countries? I'm assuming like Norway.
Yeah, I think the fact that you are recruiting internationally really shows that your awareness, right, of the problem of the diversity. Yeah, there are countries where there's just you won't be able to find that many diversity in there. I think that's totally okay. Maybe it's the way you look at it is all the people well represented, right, in your pool, and ultimately you ask yourself is why am I doing this, right? There's a business reason, incentive for us to do this, and I want to make sure that that incentive is well represented in my sourcing pool.
We have an office in Dublin, and it's hard to find non-Caucasians in Dublin, but we have teams that go across geographies to try to address that, so there is at least some way to do it.
And Brian, what about?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to tackle, we had a lot of upvotes for that, skills-based interviewing question with HackerRank and Pi, and I think the thing you have to remember is that the skills that make you good at your job are not all around programming. And so if HackerRank tells you how well you work with your peers or how well you understand customer requirements, then more power to it. But I think it just looks at one specific skill. And you've all worked with someone who is really skilled at one thing, but really bad at the interpersonal things that make it easy for you to get something done with that person. And we focus a lot on those, I guess you'd call them soft skills. That makes our workplace more productive and effective. And so I would not focus solely on skills, although I think it's a great way to source, for sure. And then you go the rest of the way and you figure out, can people work with this person? Or do I have a role where this person doesn't have to work with anyone? And then great, I'll hire them, even if they can't. Either way, maybe that would work too. So.
Thank you. It looks like we're kind of at the end of time right now, but wanted to thank all the panelists.